Hello and welcome to the first DukeEngage Hangout on Air. We're happy that you all are joining in for tonight. We're going to be on for about the next 30 minutes or so. Feel free to submit questions if you can through the question and answer feature on your Google Hangout page, or you can submit questions on the comment page where you're watching the Hangout from. And just as a reminder, the International Group Program deadline is coming up this Wednesday at 12 noon. Make sure that you are getting your applications in. And we're having drop-in advising all day tomorrow from 9 to 5 here in the DukeEngage office. As you are wrapping up your applications and have questions, there will be staff here to help you answer those. So let's get started. My name is Emily Durham. I'm Assistant Director for Programs here in the DukeEngage office. And with us tonight, we also have...
Hi, I'm Andrew Craigie. I'm a senior and part of the GUIDE program. So kind of the undergrads who help DukeEngage kind of think about new ideas for the program and help represent the program out to everyone who's applying.
All right. So Andrew's going to talk a little bit about, he did an independent project, and talk a little bit about the service focus of his program and his community partner. And then we're going to launch into a little bit more of specific application questions that you might have as you're finishing up and preparing to apply for the international program deadline or the US-based deadline coming up in January, or the independent project deadline also in January.
Sure. So I'll share kind of a little bit about what I did. And independent is different from your group program, but you'll find that there's a lot in common. So I was thinking about what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be in the world, just like y'all are. And I had started taking Portuguese. I was very interested in Brazil and started learning more about microfinance, the idea of giving very small loans to people who have their own businesses throughout the world, especially in poor areas, and really with a focus on women. So there's also an element of gender empowerment. And I worked through what's called a volunteer sending organization, which some of the group programs for DukeEngage are administered by those. So like FDS for Argentina, or Engineering World Health for Nicaragua, or Tanzania, if I'm remembering right. And so I decided that I wanted to work through this particular organization, and they helped me find an internship with a microfinance organization. And it was in Salvador, Brazil, which is a very culturally rich and historically rich city. So I was excited to really immerse myself in that. And I was going to be doing a lot of research for the director there. I knew I would need a lot of Portuguese. So I took a few more Portuguese classes, because language is often an element in the international programs, but not always. My community partner is called the Centro Ecumênico para Apoio ao Desenvolvimento, which basically means the Ecumenical Center for Supporting Development. And they give out a little over $1 million US in loans every year to these small businesses, from somebody down the street who runs a recycling business to a woman who has a stand at a farmer's market, to help these people become more self-reliant and to build their businesses and maybe add employees and really offer new opportunities in their local community. I lived with a homestay, maybe 65-year-old retired nurse who loved to teach me about the local state's cuisine and culture, and to correct my grammar. So homestays are really kind of a special part of many DukeEngage programs. And then to kind of give you an idea of the day in the life of what I got to do, I would walk to town through the beautiful historical center of the city I was in, walk to work through the beautiful historical center of the city I was in, and arrive maybe 8, 9 a.m. and check in with all the people around the office, from the receptionist to the person who was interviewing loan applicants later in the day, to the director, and say, how can I help today? And check in with the director about what projects I'd be working on, to make sure that I was really doing something that they wanted and would be helpful for them. I worked on research on things like benchmarks for different microfinance organizations in the region, and presented that research to the director. And he kind of wanted to use me as a strategic research person to do things that their staff didn't have the time to do. And that's often what DukeEngage interns get to do, is go and say, I have time, I have energy, I maybe have some skills, how can I be helpful?
All right, thank you, Andrew. So I'm going to talk a little bit, because I know many of you are thinking about your applications at the moment. A couple of technical things that we get a lot of questions about, so I thought I would address them on a broader scale here. So one question we do get a lot is the character count in the application. So it is a 2,000 word character limit, and spaces do count. So that's why we encourage you to work on your applications well before the deadline. So that if you're working from a Word document, you can try pasting your essays into the spaces to see what will allow you to fit in that space. So the application will not allow you to submit if your word count is over.
For those of you just start in a Word document, because web browsers close and then you lose all of the things you put in. Always work in a Word document.
Absolutely, absolutely. Another question we get a lot is about the reference on the application. So the reference cannot be a friend. It can't be somebody your age, a fellow student here on campus. It can be it doesn't have to be just a faculty member. It can also be a staff member, somebody, maybe your work study supervisor, somebody that knows you in a professional or academic setting. Now, for first-year students, we get a lot of questions saying, I've only been here on campus a couple of months. I don't really feel like there's somebody here on campus that can really speak about my abilities or strengths. And so what we say is it can be somebody that's not here on campus. Just make sure that they're able to answer the questions that they might need to speak to if somebody like the program director called them to ask more about your candidacy for that program.
Question.
Yes.
So Emily, if I'm on my house council's, if I'm on my house council for my freshman dorm, and I work with the GR, and we've been working together for 3 months now, would that be a good person? My GR was in her mid-20s and was in the divinity school, but was kind of in an adult role.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay?
Your GR would be a great person to use as your reference, especially because they would probably be able to tell about your ability to live within a community and being flexible and adaptable. So we encourage you, think about people that might know you in your residential settings as well. That's a great person. You don't need any outside supplemental materials to submit your application. So your reference does not have to submit a letter, no recommendation letters, but we do encourage you to give them a heads up and ask them, would it be okay if I list you as a reference, so that if they get a call from your program director or who's reading your application, that it's not a complete surprise that you have applied for DukeEngage. As Andrew said, make sure you keep a copy of your essays in a Word document. Things happen with computers. I can't stress that enough. And then one other kind of quick quirky thing that we have noticed happens in applications, in our application, is that when you do paste your essays from the Word document into your DukeEngage application, a lot of times some of the, for example, quotation marks or apostrophes will turn into question marks. So allow yourself some time to go in and make those edits. Of course, if you do end up submitting it and your apostrophes have accidentally turned into question marks, it's okay. This won't hurt your application. But if you're kind of one of those people that likes everything to be perfect, that is something that does happen. We have no control over it. You have no control over it. You just have to go in and fix it. And then one other final thing is, you will lose all paragraph formatting when you copy your essays into the DukeEngage application. So if you are crafting beautiful paragraphs at this point, don't worry about it if they all go away. It's all right. It's just going to look like one long essay for each of the short answer questions. One other quick thing I do want to mention before I want Andrew to talk a little bit more about his application process is that if you do have visa questions or passport questions, I know that those can be really personal to your specific situation. If you have questions about that right now, we encourage you to email us at dukeengage@duke.edu that we'll be able to answer those more specifically for your unique situation. So I want to turn it back over to Andrew here a second and ask him what he found was helpful as he was working on his application, and maybe to give you all some advice as you're in the home stretch.
Sure. I would say 3 things that might be helpful in terms of thinking of ideas for answering questions like, when have you worked well in a group, or when have you been flexible or adaptable? The one that was most helpful for me was I was working on my application in Perkins and Carpenter, a place I'm sure many of you know well, and I was able to turn to my friend and say, have I ever been adaptable? And she really gave good feedback. And often friends think highly of you and can give specific instances when you've done something that might help flesh out your application. And then 2 other ways you can kind of generate ideas, generate your best possible ideas instead of just what comes to mind first, is if you've made a resume before, go back and look over that and think, would that experience be a good thing to mention? Or that can help you bring back to mind things that you haven't thought about for a little while. Kind of in a similar vein, you can look back through your old Facebook photos. And so this doesn't just have to be your procrastination tool. It can actually help you jog your memory of, oh yeah, I remember that service trip I went on in high school where we had to live in a community and we were very in close quarters, or I remember that camp I was at. So find ways either through external sources like friends or your own memories to kind of jog the best examples that you can give.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's a great point, Andrew, about being really specific and thinking about high school experiences, because I know, if you've only been here on campus a couple of months, you might be thinking, I don't have a whole breadth of experiences that speak to everything I want to talk about. But thinking about the high school experiences is perfectly fine to talk about in your DukeEngage application as well. I
know that I'm as a senior, I've had interviews for various things recently, and I've still mentioned 1 or 2 high school things if they're really applicable. It's okay to mention things from high school.
So what resources on the DukeEngage website would you point students to as they're working on their application? I know there's a lot of material on the website, but if someone came up and asked you, what would you point them to?
Definitely. I'd say the first thing is the obvious one is the program profile. Some of them have a lot of really useful information. Some of them have links to articles from newspapers or academic journals that might give you more background on the subject. And so if you read those and are able to reflect that you've read those in your application, maybe the program director will think, this person's really interested. This person sounds like they really care. Other program profiles have suggestions of classes you might think about taking, and maybe you don't have time to take that specific class, but maybe you can say, I'm thinking of taking one that's related. I think it would prepare me and inform me. And then something that's really new to these profiles is if there was a guide, so one of these DukeEngage alumni who's back helping out that has done that program before, you'll see a little note about contact alumni. And you can actually send an email that will go directly to a recent alumnus or alumna who did that DukeEngage program. And you can ask whether it's questions you're wanting for yourself, like how many people were in your homestay? Did you have Wi-Fi? Did you have computers? What was the food like? Personal things, or things about the application. Like what kind of work can I expect to be doing? So what kind of stories should I tell on my application? They obviously won't be able to edit anything or give you any inside tips, but they might be able to help you think through which of your experiences would be most applicable. Maybe you could even ask them if they would look over your resume and say things that look like they would be relevant.
Another thing I would say too, if you are looking for specific help as you're working on writing your application, that the Writing Center here on campus is an excellent resource. They have drop-in advising hours, and they're very willing and able to look over your application and help you as you're crafting your essays and thinking about what you want to say. So definitely use them as a resource too. So you talked a little bit about, as a guide, I can email you if I'm a prospective student, ask questions. What are some other ways that students can use you as a resource as they're working on their application?
Definitely. For a lot of the programs, the same guides made things called, excuse the pun, resource guides. So you can look back and look at the things that they found useful as they were preparing more maybe news articles or books or videos. And so again, if you watch that and show that you're interested, that can be really helpful.
And then kind of the final question here. What do you wish you would do differently if you had to do the application process all over again?
Probably edit more and give myself more time for editing. So it's do it noon, not midnight. So it's not like you'll be working in the dark to the last minute, but maybe give yourself some time the day before it's due, the morning it's due, and look over things again. Not just small edits, but think about, did I give really the best answer? And things that I find helpful is sleeping on it after I've written something and then reading it aloud, either to a friend or to myself. And then you can think, does this really sound like me? Does this sound like what I want to convey? So I would have given myself more time for that and carved out maybe space on my calendar to say, read this out loud again, see if I like the way it sounds.
Absolutely, capture your voice in your essays. So we did have a couple of questions that were submitted via the survey beforehand. So I just wanted to address those for those students that had asked those questions. So one student asked, for students with chronic illnesses, would you recommend that they only look at domestic US-based DukeEngage programs, or would international DukeEngage programs be a viable option for them to think about? So this is a great question. I think, ultimately it's a decision that you as a student and with your family will have to make. So oftentimes there may be research involved in terms of, what's available on the ground in a particular site. So for example, if you need have a particular medication that you have to take that requires refrigeration, finding out, is there access to a refrigerator? Is there 24/7 electricity that will make that refrigerator run? So kind of technical things on the ground. And that's something that we're happy to help you with, that we can help find out, from the program directors, from on the ground, using the different resources we have, what might be available there to you. But at the end of the day, the decision rests with you about, where you want to apply, based on what you know about that site and your own health and safety and comfort in that area.
And there are a lot of major cities around the world that DukeEngage sites are in. And many of them have great hospital systems. So I have one friend who has a chronic illness and who was able to go abroad with an international group program. It really wasn't a problem, as long as you make sure that maybe talk with the program director about it if you're accepted, and just confirm that there are hospitals that could suit your needs. And like Emily said, more basic things like refrigeration if medicine needs to be refrigerated.
The big thing too is coming in and talking to us, and we're happy to do that. Maybe not necessarily during drop-in advising, but coming in, scheduling an appointment. You can always do that by sending an email at dukeengage@duke.edu, and we're happy to meet with you and talk about any concerns that you might have based on what programs that you're looking at. So we had another question about the notification process. So if you are submitting an application, let's say for an international group program, what happens? So you may or may not be contacted for an interview. Not all applicants for each program do receive an interview, but after you've submitted, you may be contacted. If you're currently abroad right now, don't worry. Our programs are very good at dealing with Skype, so they will make accommodations so that you can still participate in an interview. That will not hurt your chances of being considered for a program. But you will receive notification on December 3rd. So all applicants are notified on the same day, so December 3rd. We're not able to give any decisions before that point. So that is something going into the application process. If you are accepted, you have about a week to consider, and then your statement of intent, and that is essentially you committing to participate in the program, is due for our first round on December 9th at 12 noon. And so after that point, you are committed to the program. And so you will be going through various processes to confirm your registration, to ensure that you have everything that you need to go before your program starts. We also had another question about US-based and international program ranking. So if you are applying for a group program, you can rank your program selection. I remember if you're applying for an international program, you can only apply to one international program, but you still would have the opportunity, if you're either turned down from that international program or you decide not to accept, to apply to a US-based program. So those rankings do matter. If you rank an international program as your second choice, that's fine. And if you do get into that program, you will still have to decide at that point whether or not you want to participate. We are not able to hold that spot for you until you find out the outcome of the US-based application that you submit. So those preferences are important. They're particularly more so if you're applying for 2 US-based programs in the spring, because that ranking does determine which program you will be offered a place in. You don't ultimately get to choose. And also just remember too that Our group program and independent projects are two separate paths. So once you submit a application for an international group program, you're no longer eligible to participate in an independent project. So if anybody is watching this and still trying to decide between the independent project path and the group program path, that decision has to be made by November 5th at noon. So once you submit that group program, you cannot submit an application for an independent project for this application cycle. You'd be eligible to apply again next year. Let's see if there have been any other questions that have been submitted. And you're welcome to submit questions on our events page here or using, I believe, the question and answer function may or may not be working here this evening. I don't know, Andrew, are there any other questions you think are important for applicants to consider, or kind of nuts and bolts questions that you might be asking at this point during the process?
Well, there's the big one that a lot of people think about, and hopefully they've already settled on, but in case you're, coming to the process a little late and still deciding between which program to apply to, DukeEngage staff really emphasize, and I think are really right in emphasizing, to think about your theme rather than where you're going. So whether you want to work with children, or whether you want to work in a business, or whether you want to work in a rural versus urban environment is much more important than what part of the world you want to apply to work in. And I'd really encourage you to think about this not as a chance of where can I get Duke to fund me to go, but where can I go because of Duke, and what can I do with Duke's help? So think about this as an opportunity to do something that maybe you would never have had the chance to do any other time, whether it's teaching English at an orphanage in Cairo, or whether it's working on environmental conservation around the world, or engineering new hospital equipment in Tanzania. Think about what it is that you can uniquely give to the world, and Duke can help you give that to the world.
And I think that's one of the important reasons why you have to be returning to campus here after you participate in DukeEngage, because we want to help you think about how to connect that experience back here on campus and use the resources that we have to continue your engagement. Whether it's in that particular service focus and theme, in the particular area where you were serving, and how you want to think about continuing that engagement in your home community, in the community where you live after campus, and the work that you're doing there. So again, tomorrow, just to kind of reiterate, we have drop-in advising going all day here in the DukeEngage office. So from 9 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock, there will be DukeEngage staff here ready to answer your last-minute questions. No appointment is necessary. At this point, we don't know kind of how many students will be coming in, so I can't tell you what your wait time will be, but come in, ask us questions. If you've got specific questions about visas, encourage you to email dukeengage@duke.edu, and we will get back to you about that.
And then as you're emailing and talking with DukeEngage staff, be sure to remember that they're there to help you. They're really not there to hurt you. So it's program directors who are looking over the application, and DukeEngage staff are able to take a step back and be pretty impartial. They're there really to answer your questions. They're not noting down what you're saying and saying, oh, they mentioned that they don't have experience with this. Gotta note that down. Remember that these, Irina to Emily to Meredith to Dr. Lund, everybody here is really interested in helping you find the best program for you and helping the programs find the best participants for them. So please don't feel shy about stopping in or emailing dukeengage@duke.edu. They're there to help you, and what you ask cannot hurt you.
So a couple of other reminders too. We get a lot of questions about parents, and we encourage you, if you haven't talked to your family or parents, whoever is the responsible party for you, encourage them we encourage you to talk to them about your application decisions, where you're thinking about applying, what you might be doing there. You can send them the program profile so they can look over it. Because ultimately your parents will have to, or family member will have to agree to your participation in DukeEngage, and we encourage you to start that conversation as soon as possible. So they do have questions, you've got time to talk to them about it. Once you are accepted, your parents will also be notified at that point. And so the earlier they know what you're planning to do in the summer, that's a good thing.
This is not one of those times when you can, come home for winter break and say, guess what I got into? I'm going to blank, and then hope that they accept it, because it really depends on them accepting it. If they don't approve, then you won't be able to go. So make sure you talk with them.
If you're concerned too, if you're will be thinking about studying abroad or studying away from campus in the spring, and the DukeEngage Academy is one of the requirements, we do have special considerations for those that are studying away, and that's the only exception for not being able to participate in the DukeEngage Academy. Any last words of wisdom before we end the conversation this evening for everyone that's working on their applications?
Just wish you luck. Yeah, remember to give yourself time to edit, ask questions of DukeEngage staff because they're really nice and they're there to help you, and good luck.
All right, well, thank you so much to everyone that has tuned in this evening. Hopefully this was helpful in getting some of your last minute questions answered. I apologize, it didn't seem like the question and answer function was working on our Hangout tonight. So if there was a burning question that you wanted to ask that didn't get answered, please don't hesitate to email us at dukeengage@duke.edu. And thank you for everyone that submitted questions ahead of time. We wish you all the best as you finish up your application. Again, my golden rule is submit early. Don't wait until 11:55 a.m. on November 5th to submit. Get that done early, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. And you can rest assured that your application has been submitted and will be considered, and you're not panicking at the last minute.
Those moments when the Wi-Fi in Perkins just seems to flicker? That always happens on DukeEngage application day, right around noon. So go for 11:30 instead.
So this is something important too, and you want to do, make sure that you get it in early. All right, so with that, we're going to sign off for this evening. Thank you all for those that viewed in, and we look forward to doing this more in the future. And thank you, Andrew, for joining us tonight.
Definitely, my pleasure.